Preserved written evidence from Persia refers to a lock of 23, a thumb draw that involves drawing with the thumb while making a light hold with the proximal phalanx of the extended index finger. Within the Sassanid silver plates, some of these draws seem to resemble that of the lock of 23. Certainly, a draw like this will work. However, the weaker reinforcement from the index finger means that using this for potentially heavier bows would not be as practical as a tighter lock. As we know, there is ample evidence to suggest that the Romans used heavier bows than the Persians as a way to outdo them in power. Using a lock of 23 in this way would only make using this more difficult, unless the lock is done, of course, by locking with a tight clench with the middle finger over the thumbnail. I think this is a very good draw. I actually really enjoy using this. Got it. Canted. That was great. Such a smooth release, and the arrow was very stable, and it was also accurate. It went exactly where my eyeballs were pointed. So it's very deep in. It's held very high up there. But the point about this is that because then you don't have to really try to press on the thumb to really reinforce it as hard as you absolutely can, because then what you end up doing is you end up making it kind of more difficult to actually release the thumb at that point. So it's not as smooth of a release. If you do it like, say like this, or say you wanted to curl it like I think what the Roman manner is, something kind of like this with a slight kind of bend. Same concept where the fact that it's held deeper in the hand means that you don't have to press the finger upon it any harder than it has to be. It's much more relative. So it's a very passive, strong reinforcement of the thumb, but passive in the sense that you can more easily go from this to this, very quick and very smooth. Because of the fact is that you're not going from an extremely tight position to an open one. You're going from a passive position to another passive position, especially if you're going to do it with a rapid kind of shooting technique, such as the accelerated kind of draw that we would see. But in this case, this is perfect for that kind of shooting. So this is a 31-inch arrow, so let's see if I can actually perfect the actual rapid shooting technique with this. All right. Again, 23, extended index finger. Not as stable, but it was definitely much more rapid in that case because I had the accelerated draw force. So definitely make sure that when you're shooting in this way that you're using about an inch longer arrow than your optimal draw length. I actually would have preferred to use 2 inches longer, because if I lean into it, that's about, you know, maybe an inch that you're giving for the actual amount of space that you're getting. Good. A bit more, you can actually get it into the right position not by having it up here, because then what ends up happening is it kind of gets into this location when you really want it to be a little bit further in. So the best way to kind of do that is actually to hold it obliquely, which is to have like a flexed wrist. Oh, so good. Oh, so good. I'm going to say that this is probably the best contender. In fact, I'm going to say for, you know, with 90% certainty that the Persian manner in the Strategikon is in fact 23, maybe 24. It's a passively reinforced draw, and therefore it allows the thumb to be the first to move, and therefore it's a very smooth release. Perfect for rapid shooting technique that the Romans were doing at the time. And this also is what helps me believe that the Roman manner is something along those lines. Otherwise, why would the author choose the Roman and Persian manner at that point? But it's something along those lines in order to facilitate that rapid shooting technique, where it's, again, something that it's held underneath the base of the index finger, so it's the very base. So therefore, when you're actually pulling it, you don't need to really press the index finger on the thumb. It allows it to be passive, and therefore it's a much smoother draw, because then it allows the thumb to move first. Here's the Roman manner in that regard. Oh yeah, oh yes, that's good. It's really good. Very impressed by my technique here. It allows it to be very instinctive, but it's still very accurate, relatively speaking. That way you don't have to necessarily take your time having to readjust your aim with, like, say, a heavy bow. You can just have like a light 45-pound bow like this, which, they could have very well used. The instructions in the equipment does say that it's on the lighter side of something that is much more manageable for them to actually draw, rather than the really heavy draw weights that Procopius is saying that the Romans are using, a few decades earlier. So that's probably doctrine that kind of changed in a nuanced sort of way between them. It was difficult at first to try to actually get used to holding this down with an extended index finger, because I was so used to actually just really trying to, tighten the index finger over the thumb, which, it has its place, but still, I think with this kind of shooting, it's perfectly adequate. The 1500s manual Arab author said that it's useless except for using encephalic bows, which makes sense. I mean, we do know that based on the Roman accounts that the Persians were using kind of weaker bows to be able to get up a much higher speed rate of shooting. But again, if you want a higher speed rate of shooting, it's facilitated by an economic technique of being able to have a smooth release. So it kind of makes sense that this is the best interpretation for that to be the Persian manner, and why they got it from there. Still, it's something that it just takes getting used to, like everything. You have to understand that even holding it really tightly, with an extremely, active reinforcement of the thumb, that's something that requires training, because you're not going to get used to that. It's just a matter of actually training with it and having a consistent schedule of training. And it just so happens to be that the archaeological evidence of Roman thumb rings that are visor shaped, I have another video analyzing those later, but a lot of them have this visor shape. Some of them do have a groove. That means that you can do it like basically on the surface of it. So, the surface is facing out, but the surface facing towards you. In this example, which we do know that there's one particularly in period that is rather large, but has exactly that. Means that it is grabbed right on that end right there, and therefore you can hold it. Oh yeah, perfectly fine. I'm very well used to this draw weight, and all I got to do is just add that technique of the draw force, and I'm maximizing the power of the bow. I don't need to hold it down really tightly in either theoretical Roman or theoretical Persian manner. I actually would have to kind of disagree with the Arab author and agree with the Mamluks instead, saying that it is a perfectly strong draw. It just doesn't have to be it's just not actively strong, it's passively strong. By the way, I innovated this little kulak sort of thing, innovated with a extra shoelace that I used from that I got from a historical set of shoes. So I just had that laying around. I had a kulak somewhere, but I'm pretty certain someone in my household threw it away because they thought it was a useless piece of leather that was just sitting around. So got to be a little bit more careful about how I'm storing my things, but nonetheless, I just decided to use this. So a little off note, this just helps keep it in place.